Hi, this is Professor Triplet, and in this video we are going to start looking at curves for modeling. Now, this video is going to be more practical on what curves are used for and how to model with them. As far as all the math behind curves, I will leave that to a different professor to teach, but we will talk a little bit about the terminology and where we use curves. So first thing though, let's go ahead and make a curve. So I'm going to go ahead and come up to this this shelf right here and the Curves and Surface tab, and I'm just going to click and create this this one circle right here. And I can go ahead and just scale it up if I want. All right. So with my attribute editor open, I can see that this thing says that it has 8 spans. What are spans? That's something we need to know. So I'm gonna show you how we can count these 8 spans. To do that, I'm going to right click over this circle and hold my right click mouse button down. Now as I'm holding it, I'm going to keep holding it and drag over to my control verts and let go. Alright, let's hide the grid and let's select these. I'm just going to select it over here, and you can see if you count these, there are 8 of these little points that I just selected. These points are called CVs, or control vertices, and the control vertices basically define the shape of a curve. Now in between each control vertice, the curve that's created is called a span. So that's what this number is. So we have 8 spans and 8 control vertices. Alright, so if I grab one control vertice and go to my move tool, you can see that I can go ahead and move this all over the place. And what happens is mathematically this curve is it's averaging between all of these, and it's trying to hit this point, but in a smooth sense, in a smooth way. So it's not like in a hard corner type of way. So okay, so anyway, all right. So let's go back to object mode. So if I want to grab just the object, I just right click again, and I drag off to object mode, and now I can select the object again. All right. Okay, so I brought the spans up and the control verts up because we are going to be messing with those when we're playing with curves. Okay, so let me go ahead and I'm just going to delete this one. Let's draw our own curves. So we can do that with this tool right here. And I like to typically go into orthographic views when I draw a curve. So I'm going to go ahead and just click on this, and let's just go to my top view. And if you want to snap it to the grid, you can do that. So let's go ahead and just click, 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 and click. There we go. All right. So a curve is made of 3 or more control verts. Okay, so I know I just put 4 down, but I could have put 3 down and I would still have a curve. If you just have 2, it won't draw out a curve. You have to have at least 3 control verts. Alright, so if I grab these, again, just like before, and I have my grid snapping on, so I can turn that off, you can see that my curve is moving around. Now this little handle at the end works a little bit different than the other control verts. It's actually not a control vert. It's more of like a Bezier corner, which we'll go into later. But anyway, so this is a control vert, this is a control vert, this and this. Okay. So why would we need to use something like this? Well, there's sometimes shapes that are very hard to achieve without using curves. Okay. So let me bring up an example of an object that I used a lot of curves on to create certain shapes. So this violin object, let's look at the final render. This violin object used a curve to get this scroll shape here on the end. I used a curve to get this scroll shape here, and this was actually the basis of creating this whole top piece of the violin. So basically, if I didn't have curves to work with, I would have to try to fill this in perfectly with polygons and then extrude polygons from there. And it's possible to do that as well, but the curves just kind of make it so much easier because it's giving me that averaged shape that I can go ahead and use control verts to move around and adjust. So let's go ahead and go back to Maya. All right. So what other curves can we make? All right. This is a freeform type of curve. It's called the pencil curve tool. If I click on this, I can go ahead and just draw out like that. Now, we'll see a difference here, though. Let's go to Control Verts and look at all those. It's kind of messy. It's kind of ugly. And if we look at our attribute editor, we have 54 spans, which is a lot. I mean, it's not a lot if you need that many, but because of the fact this probably doesn't need that many, I would consider this a lot. How would we get rid of all these and make it something more reasonable? Let's say this one we have only 3 spans. What if we wanted to make this one, I don't know, let's say 8 spans, like the circle? Well, we can go into our curves tool right here, and we can go to this rebuild tool, and I can click on the option box. Now, of course, make sure you have this selected, and let's go ahead and give it 10 spans since we already have that in there. I'm not going to mess with all of these other settings. I'm just going to basically rebuild this. Let's make sure this is okay. So I reset the tool. The only thing I changed was the number of spans. So let's go ahead and hit apply. Now, I don't know if you noticed while watching the video, but this thing just smoothed out. So let's look at the control verts now. All right, so now we have 10 spans, and you can see there's way less control verts, and it actually looks a lot nicer. So that's a way that if you needed to freeform and use the pencil tool and draw, you can just rebuild the curve. This rebuilding curve option may become very important later if you're trying to loft multiple curves together, and that's something that we'll go into in these videos. So we'll talk about loft in a little bit too. All right, so let's jump over to the next building tool. Now this is an arc tool. This one's kind of interesting. I'm going to go ahead and just click 3 spots there. And you can see that this is giving me, it's actually giving me the radius of this circle, and you know, it's kind of showing this like an angle, or more I should say as a protractor, something like that. So just another tool where if you need to build an arc and it had to be something very specific, you can go ahead and use this tool. Now this tool does have a history to it, so if I was going to use some other tools on top of this, it might not let me because of the history. And we haven't talked about history yet, but history is something that basically everything you do to any object in Maya typically retains a history, and that history is shown in the channel box. And eventually, most things you need to get rid of that history, otherwise it makes your scenes really heavy because it's just retaining a bunch of information you don't need. Sometimes you do need the history, though, in the case of like rigging, or there's a few cases where you need the history. Anyway, if you want to get rid of your history on something, I'm just going to go ahead and hit this button right here. It's delete by type history. It gets rid of the history. If you didn't notice, there was a little, there was something here that went away, so it got rid of some kind of history on this. Alright, so let's go back to our curve surfaces. Let's look at the next one. Now, this is attach two curves. This is pretty simple. If I wanted to attach these two curves together, I can select both of these. So you would select one, shift select the next one, and click on that, and you'll see they'll actually attach to each other. Now, this is probably not going to be too pretty and work too well, but it is a solution if you need to attach two curves together. And of course, you can see it left the old curves there, and now we've got the new curves. So let's go ahead and just delete those. All right, so what's next? This one is to detach curves. Okay, this is interesting. Sometimes you want to take just a section of your curve out and say, hey, I want to build something off of this section of a curve. So in that case, what you can do is select a curve, right click, and you can go to edit point. Oops, wrong one, sorry, curve point. And when you click and drag, you can see you get like this point that's on there, all right? And I can leave that anywhere I want, and if I hit this, what happens is that it separates that curve on that little point that I just created. So let me go ahead and do that one more time. So I select it, right click, curve point, you click somewhere on the curve and drag, and you can see this point's coming out. Let's say we just need this little top section right here. Then I can hit that, and then it goes ahead and separates that off. So looks like it goes ahead and resets the pivot all the way to the origin. So that's kind of weird, but you can change that by just hitting center pivot, and that's this button right here. Modify center pivot is where it'd be in the menu, by the way. And also, I guess I should mention the delete by type is in your edit. Delete by type history. All right. So let's go ahead and I'll just undo that. Go back to our object mode. And by the way, these are called marking menus. When I right click and bring up these menus, these are called marking menus. And they're very useful. If you hit spacebar, you get a whole bunch of different menus. Basically, almost every menu you see up here is within the spacebar. And if I hit spacebar and I right click and drag, then you can see this is where I can get all my viewport cameras just really quickly. This is called they call this the hot box. Basically, you have access to everything. All right, so let's go to the next curve tool. Okay, this is a knot. All right, so sometimes you want to add a curve in, but you want to add it in just like in a very specific place. So in that case, you go back to this curve point like we did last time, draw your point in there, and then click that right there. So now if I go to control verts, well, maybe this is a bad example because you probably couldn't tell that that wasn't there before, but now it's there. So let's do this on a different one. Let's go to this one. Control verts. So we can see that right here, there's no control vert, right? So I'm going to go to curve point, click right there, and then add knot. Now when I right click control verts, you can see there is a control vert there now. So it just added it in, and it did move the curve a tiny little bit, but wasn't much. Okay, so next thing, let's see. This one's a good one. This tool will not work on this if you don't delete the history. So it'll work on a regular curve like this. But what this is to extend the end. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit it. And if you didn't notice, it just extended this little end right here. And it kind of did it really messy and in a way I don't really like. But it is what it is. It still works. So not sure. Let's see, I guess that one goes there, that one goes there. There you go. Now, if I didn't want all of these, I can actually just select two of these and hit delete, and they're gone. So that's one way to clean that up. All right, so that's just the extend curve. All right, what's next? Okay, this one's interesting. This works out very nice. I'm going to select this. And then I'm just going to select this tool. And you can see what it did is it just made a duplicate of this curve and moved it a little bit. Now, the reason why this comes in handy is if I select this first one and then shift select the second one, I can use a loft and basically build like a little surface between these two. So I went ahead and just hit my loft button, and there we go. Now, I know I said we'd get into loft later, but I just figured I'd show it really quick right now. There's more you can do with the loft than just that. So let's undo that. All right. So the next one, this is to rebuild a curve. We've talked about that. I like to go where the options are, but we can go ahead and just hit that. What it's going to do, though, is that it's going to rebuild this based on the last options I had. So it's going to put 10 CVs in there. All right, so if I look at this, let's go to the attribute editor. You can see right now it has 10 CVs. Okay, next one. So this is add points. Select a curve to add points. I feel like we did that already, but let's go ahead and hit this. Oops. Okay, so that's, I forgot. This one works a lot like the extend one, but it lets you add it in manually, and I would say this is probably a lot better than using that the extend one here. I think that's what it was called. Yeah, extend curve. So that's how you can just keep adding to your curve if you've already stopped. Let's look at this one. Okay, curve editing tool. I'm not a huge fan of this tool, but I'll show what it does really quick. You grab it and you can kind of start messing with the way your curve is shaped through this manipulation of this tool. You can slide it around to different parts of the curve. You know, crease it if you want to. Turn it, you know, so it's just, it works, but I just have never had a use for this. So there's somebody who's probably uses it all the time, but I'm not that guy. So, all right, let's just undo that. All right, so the next one, this is a Bezier curve. Now this is actually a different kind of curve, and these I do like using a lot, and I'll show you why. So I'm going to click on this. All right, so I just clicked once, and now I'm going to click and drag. And as I drag, I get a Bezier handle that comes out. And what it does is, if you used Illustrator, basically works the same way as that. So it just gives you control, gives you these handles that you can control things with. And you can also just do, you know, single point curves too. So for the assignment that we're going to be doing for this week, the Bezier curve works really, really well because sometimes you need these sharp corners like this. Now, if I really, what's happening with the Bezier is that the handles are still there. You just have them all sitting on top of themselves. So if I grab that one right there, that's the actual control vert. And then these are the handles, of course. You can just manipulate those. But like that, I'm getting the handle there. And if I want to turn it back into a sharp corner, then I just have to work it back towards itself again. I probably could turn on vert snap and maybe snap it to itself. I'm not sure. Apparently not. There, that works. If you use the curve snap, you can kind of snap it to itself. So, okay. So that's good for this section. We basically ran through all these. The one I didn't go through is this box one, and the reason why I didn't go through is because I just really don't use it at all. It basically is a bunch of separate spans that are just butted up next to each other. So that's why I didn't really show it. Okay, so that is how to make a bunch of curves and the different tools that are in this first section here.